Hi, and welcome everybody to this webinar, which we are doing on the EU, so the European Union updates, apologies, and the USA, so United States regulatory update. We have Josh and myself here with you, so good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are. And if you're watching this recording back, thank you so much for signing up and watching. We're going to get started, and before we get started, we are going to quickly introduce ourselves in case you don't know who we are. So let me introduce myself very quickly, and before that, just talk about some little webinar participation tips. You shouldn't be able to unmute your line, but if you are, please make sure it's muted. We don't want to hear any private conversations going on. Please actively participate. Joe and I spend a lot of time together talking with each other about various things. So we want you to learn from these particular topics that we're talking about. So please do put any queries that you have in the chat and we will try our best to answer them. We've only got a short time here with you today. So if we don't manage to answer them, we promise we'll get back to you and try and address the queries that you put in there. I have put some previous links in the chat, and we will continue to put some more in just to give you some further reading or guidance. And hopefully you can see in the chat 2 previous links. One to think about, which we'd love you to complete at the end, is the questionnaire. So we want to know, how did you find the session, and any comments for future sessions. And we've also got the list of webinars that are up and coming from ICW, one which is on GPSR, which I'll come to in a moment, and we'll be talking about that. All of the webinars will be recorded, so they are available for you to look back after if you are missing anything we're talking about, and then any issues, we have the email there that you can contact. Okay, so who am I? My name is Geraldine Koch. I'm a product safety consultant based in the UK, in London. I've been working in product safety for 20 years. Many years ago, I worked with Joel at a testing laboratory. We worked together. And during that time, I've trained lots and lots of people, many participants, on product safety and specific topics, which I thoroughly enjoy because I learn every time I do a session as well. Just a few things, and I'll try and keep it brief, and I'll put some more information in the chat because a few of these projects are really interesting and worth knowing a little bit more about. I was the technical author of 3 PASs. One of them is specific to button and coin batteries, which I know Joe will be talking about. PAS 7055, and then PAS 7100 and 7050 are overarching generic topics about corrective action and recall and bringing safe products to market. And the amazing thing about these particular British standards, which is what they are, is they are free to download. So if you want me to put specific ones in the chat, please do let me know, but I'm going to find the PAS 7050 link and put that in the chat for you so you can start with that one. But if you put it into your search engine, you should be able to download that for free. And any problems, you can contact us and we'll let you know. I also want to briefly talk about the SPEAK project. So the SPEAK project is the Safe Non-Food Consumer Products in EU and China. And I was actually in China earlier this year talking about GPSR, which we're going to be talking about in a moment, and some other topics. And the SPEAK project is a project that has a lot of information available online, does a number of webinars in educating Chinese manufacturers on product safety. So if you are a manufacturer based in China, or maybe you're based somewhere else in the world, and you'd like to have this information in your native language, a lot of the information online is translated into Chinese, and it's free to download and to have a look at. So I highly recommend having a look at that website. And again, I'll put that in a chat in a moment when Joel's talking. I also work at EU level on the CAST project, which is the coordinated activity for the safety of products. And the last thing just to talk about, because I don't want to be talking about myself too long, is the Business Certificate of Competency in Product Safety, which I'm really proud to be working on. And this is an education program for manufacturers based here in the UK, but based anywhere in the world that wants to attend. And of course, I work with the amazing ICW team, including Joel, on various topics and consulting projects that they have. So over to you, Joel.
Perfect. Thank you. And I'd also like to say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. Like Geraldine, I have been working within the testing, inspection, certification, compliance industry for 20 years now. My standard disclaimer, I am not a chemist, an engineer, a scientist, an attorney. I look at compliance from a business perspective and try to help you identify what the requirements are and what you need to do to ensure your business can continue to sell products, can enter new markets, can utilize compliance as a competitive advantage, protect your revenues, and so forth. And I do this through thought leadership advice, insights, regulatory knowledge, and working with partners like Geraldine and ICW. And my background for the last 20 years has been working with a variety of global laboratories and smaller and mid-size service providers, but really working across all industries. And as Geraldine mentioned, enough about myself. Let's jump into the actual content here. So we would like to just start by reminding everyone who ICW is. And it is a company that is comprised of a team of compliance and software experts. We bring together a team of employees who have worked for the various testing labs, manufacturers, but also global software companies. So bringing together the expertise, the regulatory knowledge, the data scientists, and the machine learning experts. We consolidate all of the testing, inspection, certification, knowledge, resources, information into a single platform that provides businesses a competitive advantage. By having all of the information in a single source, it is readily available globally. It allows you to tie in with things such as e-filings that we'll discuss in a little bit, and really respond to both regulators and your customers as they request information, because the data is held in that central repository. Now, we don't want to spend too much time on this. We'll open it up at the end if you do have more specific questions, but at this point, I'd like to hand it back to Geraldine to lead us off.
Thanks so much, Joel. And just to mention about the ICW system, I think that, working in compliance, which both you and I have done for many years now, there is a lot of administration, which is vital in any role that we have, right? We both run our own businesses, and administration is a key part. And if you haven't got that right, it can make it very difficult if you're facing a challenge, or even just trying to keep up to date with all of the stuff that's going on. I mean, we had to cut this presentation down quite significantly, right? Because we could have spoke about so many things. So I highly recommend connecting with the ICW team. There's over 60 employees, such a wealth of knowledge, and they can help keep you on top of all of this legislation and exciting stuff that's going on. But what are we going to talk about? We've only got 45 minutes.
I was just going to add to that. And they are lab agnostic. So an independent third-party provider, meaning as Geraldine and I discuss regulations today, ICW looks, regardless of the regulation, regardless of the testing lab labs you are working with, to bring the data together.
Yeah. And it really helps me when I'm trying to get, what's the requirements for products for my clients. I just quickly email the team, and they are so responsive. So yeah, a huge thanks to the ICW team in helping me, and I know Joel. So let's talk about some specific things that we feel that you need to be aware of that have either just come out or have come out quite recently, or things that are on the horizon. There are lots more. There's lots of other things you need to be aware of, but we just had to pick a few. We are going to be talking about the GPSR. I'll try and do a little quiz and see if anyone knows what these acronyms mean. Or I am gonna answer them in the upcoming slides, but deliberately put it here without explaining what it is. Does anybody know what GPSR stands for? Just put it in the chat, and I can check that I guess when you're awake, you're listening, that the chat function works. So let me know if you know what GPSR stands for. And also PSTI. Yes, well done, somebody. Thank you so much. It works. The General Product Safety Regulations. Okay, you all know this then, that's fine. What about PSTI, which I'm not going to lie, I have to look down, make sure I've got it on the slide because I can't remember specifically what it means, but we will be talking about that in a moment when I'm on pressure. It is to do with connected products, definitely. And then we're going to be talking about the EU Digital Product Passport, which has been spoken about for a long time and has just come out now in a piece of legislation. And then I'm going to pass over to Joel to talk about the CPSC, which is the Consumer Product Safety Commission e-filing. And we think this is really important, actually. This is something you really need to be aware of. So we're spending quite a bit of time talking about that. And then generally, how do you integrate this? And what about online and AI solutions? And then a Q&A session. But we'd rather keep this interactive. So please do ask your questions in the chat throughout. We're not going to wait till the end. You know, if something you specifically want to ask when there's a topic on the slide, please do just interact. And I can see that the chat function's working, so no excuses. Okay, let's talk about the General Product Safety Regulation. I'm going to be totally honest, and I actually was really excited about this regulation. And I don't get excited about regulations. I find them generally quite boring to read, to be honest with you. So in the past, I've relied on my lovely colleagues, one of them being Rutger, who did a presentation earlier on this year, and I'll put the link in the chat for that, on the GPSR. And he's doing another one coming up later this year on the GPSR. So if you want to know more about that, I highly recommend that you sign up to that. So they're the ICW webinars on these topics. And he really brought it to life actually early on in the year. And then I went out to China and presenting on this topic. And I actually really enjoyed reading the legislation because it's doing all the things that we need it to do. So the challenges that we're facing with online marketplaces, which I know a few of them are definitely on board with this and really happy with it and working towards the goals that it has. But it's all about keeping consumers safe and protecting consumers, protecting European consumers. Don't want to get political on it, but GB, we're not part of GPSR. And what makes it a little bit confusing is you have the General Product Safety Regulation in Europe, which is Regulation 2023/988. And then you have the General Product Safety Regulations, I think it's 2015 now, in GB. So even though they're called the same, they're actually different. And this is why our lives are so much fun, because it's a little bit confusing with some things. So the General Product Safety Regulations is just throughout Europe. If you want to pull up the regulation, just put that into your search engine, Regulation 2023/988. I will also put a link in the chat on the GPSR that you can have a further look about the GPSR on the European Commission website. It will replace the previous General Product Safety Directive. I'll try not to go too much into it, but there is a difference between a directive and a regulation and why they did this. And then it will also replace Directive 87/357 EEC. Now, this is a question. Who knows on the webinar what directive that is? And I feel like I need to get you a prize somehow. If you contact me after, I'll send you a prize. Now, this actually comes into force on the 13th of December 2024. So it's really important to be aware of that, and that's happening pretty soon. December, can you believe it? Christmas will be here before we know it. So if you're not aware about this legislation, then I highly recommend taking a look at it. And one of the concepts that it brings in as well is about the precautionary principle and some other topics as well. Okay, there's a long question that's come in the chat, which I absolutely love, but I'm going to read that when Joel is presenting, and I'll come back to you on that. I'm thinking that nobody, yeah, well done. Food Imitation Directive. I wasn't sure if anyone would know what that is. So yes, Directive 87/357 is the Food Imitation Directive. One of my favorite pieces of legislation because it's like 3 sentences. It's so easy to read. Basically, don't make things look like food is what it's saying. Now, the new General Product Safety Regulation is actually replacing that. So they're now incorporating that because they knew that it wasn't really interpreted throughout Europe consistently. Okay, so let's move on very, very quickly to the next 2 topics, but the PSTI, so the Product Security and Telecommunications Infrastructure Act that we have. So this is actually split into 2 parts. We have the Act and we have the regulation, which really focuses on consumer products, on relevant consumer connected products. So they're specific to specific products. Sorry to repeat the same word there, but specific products are what's relevant. So it's worth having a look at that. So things like smartphones, connected children's toys, baby monitors, wearable connected fitness trackers. The best thing to do, and sometimes it can be overwhelming, is just to have a look at the legislation. The language can be a bit tricky, but the first thing is to look at the scope and what's applicable. There's some really great information on the .gov.uk website, further explaining what this is, and also Electrical Safety First, who are a charity here based in the UK, have worked on some nice guidance documents with some other stakeholders, and there's some really useful information there. I actually bought a printer recently, and I had a statement of compliance from the manufacturer here in relation to PSTI. So things are moving on with that very quickly, and that came into force on the 29th of April 2004. Okay, so the next slide, very, very quickly, is talking about the EU Digital Product Passport. So this has actually come out in the new eco design regulations, which have just come out 13th of June this year, so 2024. Again, I highly recommend having a look at the regulation itself, and there's a lot of guidance documents out there about this. And this is about gathering information on the product supply chain and assisting consumers and businesses to make an informed choice. And it's all about sustainable products and eco design. Again, there's a lot more information available online about the product passport specifically, but these are really important pieces of legislation that you need to be aware of that have come into force or are coming into force later this year. Okay, over to you, Joel.
Okay, thank you. So what we'd like to do now, what I'd like to do is share an overview or an update on what is going on in the United States. And there is a lot going on, but let's try and focus on a few areas. So I'd like to start with just key existing regulations from the Consumer Product Safety Commission. I always laugh when I see the, Consumer Product Safety Act, or think about the CPSIA, the Federal Hazardous Substance Act, because these have been here for a while. I think we're going on 20 years now with the CPSIA. It's hard to believe because I am not getting older at all. So hard to believe that it's been 20 years that we've been discussing these, but they continue to hold relevance in the United States. There are expanding regulations. Reese's Law, which was covered heavily at ICPHSO, as Geraldine and I saw, dealing with the safety of button cell and coin batteries, mandating secure packaging to prevent ingestion by children or young individuals. As we think about the updates that are existing this year, and again, we're already halfway through this year, but window coverings, regulations to address the safety, mandating that window coverings with operating cords must meet specific performance requirements. Button cell and coin batteries, stricter regulations containing those, as I've just mentioned a few seconds ago. And with toy safety, which took effect in April, updates on technical requirements such as acoustics, battery safety, projectiles, clarifies some phthalate limits, and toy tracking labels. I'm not going to go into great detail about these right now, but just ensuring everybody is aware. And if you have questions, feel free to contact me, or again, the information is available more publicly. As we look towards next year, there are expanding Consumer Product Safety Commission regulations and initiatives. This includes developing standards and regulations for lithium-ion batteries used in micromobility devices, things such as e-bikes. We're likely to see mandatory requirements for the batteries utilized in those, building on some current voluntary standards. So we're going to keep an eye on those. but probably the biggest topic is e-filing. And it is the Consumer Product Safety Commission's modern approach for filing of information. So at a very high level, want to spend the next few minutes discussing what is e-filing, who is responsible, what must be certified, the e-filing timeline, options, and I'm not sure why we have a technology solution demo because we will not be doing that in there. Guess I accidentally left that on the slide, but it's going to be a lot of information and I'm going to go fairly quickly. As Geraldine saw, the initial draft presentation I put together for today had approximately 50 slides. So there's a lot of content behind e-filing. And what we'd like to do, what I'd like to do today is just share very high level. So what exactly is e-filing, which is set to be implemented later this year and into next year, and I'll review the timeline in a minute or two. But specifically, it's a program that requires importers and importers of record to electronically file data elements, including certificate of compliance with the U.S. Customs and Border Protection through ACE, the Automated Commercial Environment. It's basically a shift to modernize and streamline the compliance process while enhancing the efficiency and accuracy of the data that is being shared. There are specific requirements for the e-filing of certificates of compliance for the imported consumer products. And again, this only pertains to imported products coming into the US, not products that are manufactured domestically. So who has to file or who is responsible for the e-filing? Importers of record must file certificates of compliance electronically. Any party which the Customs and Border Patrol identifies or allows to be an importer of record. Importers can identify a broker partner to help them e-file. And again, as I said, domestic manufacturers are not required unless they are importing products and they are the importer of record. Information that has to be filed includes identification of the product, descriptions, identification of that importer, contact information, and certifications. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of those. So let's start though with what must be certified. Anything that is subject to a consumer product safety rule, standard, or regulation. So things that we are looking at today as it pertains to product safety, as we discuss CPSIA or flammability, anything that must follow an existing standard or regulation, or as we look at future regulations. Products that are imported for consumption or warehousing or that are distributed through commerce. Again, these are very broad statements, and we can go a lot more into detail on each, but for the purposes of today, want to just keep this at a high level. Now, what products are required to e-file? This is a broad list, and apologies, I've got to put some reading glasses on here to read them all. But you know, everything from youth bicycles and bicycle helmets to apparel, to cribs, to mattresses, bicycle helmets, refrigerator doors, swimming pool slides. You can see the diverse range of products requiring either a children's product certificate or a general certificate of conformity. We also have a link at the bottom that has more details on the products requiring certifications. Now, the timeline. There was a beta pilot launch, if you will, in 2023, and it's continued into 2024. Expected completion was in June, and from there, we move now to voluntary e-filings. So non-pilot participants can elect to participate. You can choose to begin filing information. It will help your business to understand the process, the steps, and the approach you need to take in preparation for the 2025 mandatory timeline of this. And there's a variety of things that this can help with, whether it is understanding the electronic filing system, the data formats, and we'll talk a little bit about the options, I believe, methods to fulfill e-filing. You have to enter the data into the CPSC's registry, but there are ways to do this. You could do a manual entry, log into the portal, and enter the data. You can create a file in an XML format that conforms to the CPSC scheme that they've shared and do a bulk upload. Or you can work with a platform and build an API or a data bridge from your platform into the system. So an example, ICW has the API integration providing the connection. So by storing all of your data in a platform such as ICW's, you can then directly conduct the e-filing by pushing the data out through the API. So 3 different aspects. Again, it'll probably be different for each business based on your business size, the number of products you need to file for, and or the platforms you utilize, whether it is an in-house platform or with a partner such as ICW, the ability to have those APIs. Now,
And I think
yeah.
Sorry, John. I was just going to say that on your slide where you had, like, previously you were like ICW technology solution demo, that it was a mistake. I don't think it was a mistake, because I think it's highlighting that actually, if you want to have a demo, you want to see the account and see how this all works together, then we highly recommend you can reach out to us. I'll put Joel's email in there and my email, and I'll put the e-marketing email in there. And sometimes it's just nice to see how this actually works in supporting you, and trying to keep up with all of this legislation is a challenge. If your products are already on the ICW system, you will get updates on things that are going on that are relevant in your area. So I highly recommend reaching out if you do want to have a demo. Sorry to interrupt.
No, perfect. And it's a good point, because the e-filing does require data supporting third-party testing, the general conformity certificate, the types of data which are collected through the ICW platform. So again, we're happy to share that demo. And as we talk about mitigating risk, how do we avoid the penalties? Non-compliance to the e-filing could result in fines or seizures of non-compliant products. How do we mitigate that risk? Well, the first thing is invest in training. Join webinars like today's or other webinars Geraldine or I may be presenting in the future. I know Geraldine has some upcoming ones as well. Use technology to mitigate the risk. Companies like ICW have platforms which are proven and being utilized today by global retailers and manufacturers. They have been part of the pilot and conducting the interface for e-filing. So it is now proven methodologies and technologies. I don't have on here audits, but conduct random audits to ensure compliance with those e-filings. Consult experts. The ICW team has folks that know a lot more about e-filings than I do and are happy to assist. Experts on regulations such as Geraldine, where we can work with you to identify what are your requirements across the globe. If you take an approach for the US, can you also utilize that data or strategy across other countries? Can you collect the information and utilize it to ensure your products are safe? Because at the end of the day, that's really what all of these different countries are trying to do, ensure safety. And probably one of the most important, and this comes from the marketing and salesperson here, me, maintain communication. We have to communicate. We have to communicate with the regulatory bodies. We have to communicate with the providers we work with, our suppliers, to ensure that we have built processes which will allow us to successfully submit the data through the e-filing, verify it, and utilize it as an advantage. And by advantage, I think, how do we turn e-filing into a competitive benefit to our businesses? How do we use it to help us? Well, it streamlines the process of submitting compliance certificates. It should reduce time because things are now automated and electronic versus historical manual submissions. So this should allow our businesses to operate more efficiency. In addition, utilizing APIs to conduct the e-filings should improve accuracy through automated validation. The systems are going to be able to ensure that submissions meet the requirements, thereby reducing the risk of errors. This also provides something that we've been, challenged with for years, which is traceability, a clear line of who provided which information, who submitted it, who is recognized as the importer of record, and allowing us to basically provide the steps to reduce risk. Now, that opens another topic as I go a little bit off the slide, but I think it's important. We need to look also at some of the challenges. How do we ensure accurate testing information? Importers must ensure that the testing information is correct and that the products comply with the relevant safety standards. I add that because it falls under the communications bullet. How do we ensure that we are working with our laboratories or our partners to validate that that testing is accurate, that we have coordinated with third-party testing labs to correctly document all of the various complex testing? And again, mitigating our risk to avoid the penalties for non-compliance, the risk of fines, the risk of seizure, and continue with that, let's call it continuous monitoring and auditing. Now, want to talk a little bit about AI. A little bit off topic from e-filing, but it does tie in terms of the future of how do we monitor what we are filing? How do we use artificial intelligence to help us file more accurately, review what requirements may be out there, or analyze the product or testing data we have today? I'd like to start with the standard disclaimer. AI, artificial intelligence, searches website content and learns from it. So please remember that you're putting your faith in what somebody else has published on the internet. And it goes back to the old joke that everything it's published on the internet, it must be accurate and true. Not quite always the case. So you want to realize AI is a great tool. It will continue to grow and learn. I use it pretty much every day now, and it is a great step in the compliance process. I use it to review master materials, provide me guidance, help draft information. But the critical factor is anytime I look at the AI result, I analyze this. And I actually had this discussion a week or so ago with an attorney who said they are using AI as well to help them with some of their regulatory filings. And again, conceptually, it would reduce the amount of hours an attorney has to take, so hopefully lower billing rates. But it is just that. It is learning, the AI is gathering the information from the web. And it might be 30% accurate, it might be 70% accurate. So always have a human or an expert review it, assess it, and ensure that it is accomplishing what you are asking it to accomplish. My last point is it aids the compliance process, but doesn't solve or replace the need for a compliance solution. AI is not building a process. We are. We are laying out all the steps, whether it is the components of e-filing or broader regulations, some of which Geraldine shared, some I'm touched on, and a lot others. So we really need to go back to what is the compliance process, and these are components to help both automate it, optimize it, and make it more efficient.
And I think I'll just
with that,
add
I
a
will,
few things there, Joel. So,
yep,
so you're mentioning really valid points there, and I want to go back to GPSR and some of the questions that have been noted, which I have answered in the chat. But the penalties, one thing I feel about penalties, and this is my personal opinion, the difference between the US and Europe is significant when it comes to penalties. Let me just put it that way. So if you are selling globally, I think it's something definitely to be aware of. And I think risk is a key thing, you know, both risk to your consumers, you know, the customers, but also to your brand and your company as well. You know, not complying with these pieces of legislation and the requirements can lead to significant financial costs, both in the US and in Europe. And the General Product Safety Regulation is mentioned about penalties. There's actually a specific section on penalties. I believe it's Article 44. I was just pulling it up and looking at it, but there is, you know, talking about that. And if I'm honest with you, not that businesses will like me saying this, I wish that we were at the same level of the US in terms of penalties, because as mentioned it here, it should be dissuasive, but some legislation we have here is not really dissuasive, and people just think, okay, if I'm going to get fined, you know, £2,000, then I'll just take the risk and I'll do it. But that doesn't really happen in the US. So
yeah.
that was just my
And,
thoughts on penalties.
and it's funny because even if I go back to broader regulations, REACH or ROHS, where there are more stringent enforcement in Europe, California may have their iterations, but in other requirements, Europe enforces a lot stronger. So again, I go back to we really have to look at the regulations and say, where are we selling products? Where are we introducing products to the market? And I'm going to say this broadly, what is the lowest common safety denominator and the highest? And where in between are your businesses, our clients' businesses, where do they need to be to ensure compliance and safety? There's, I'll say it from US side, the rule of the law. Some companies go above that because they want to protect their brand. Some
And
will, yeah.
And they should, right? And this is what, so there's an article, and I haven't got the link to it here, but I'll happily email it to anybody. There was an article done by a lady called Catherine Niven and her colleagues, where they interviewed product safety professionals around the world. And what they found is that a lot of people, their opinions on this, and it was specific on child safety, but it's generic, is that people are they think that compliance is like the end. And that is not how it should be. That should actually be the beginning and the basic. And I know it's overwhelming. And I know that in reality, that's how it actually works. But you need to be going above and beyond. And it's challenging because you've got state requirements. You've then got each member of EU, remember, probably has their own language, but then also has their own interpretation and may have requirements that go above and beyond the European requirements. So you definitely need to know that. But one key thing, and summarizes it, and I put it in the chat, is PAS 7050. So PAS 7050 really summarizes everything that Joel's talking about. And I wish that they put that exact terminology in the general product safety regulations, but I don't have the power with the EU to have that in there. But they actually mention in Article 14 about internal processes for product safety. And that's exactly what Joel is talking about. So if there's something to take away from today, maybe there's some specific legislation that you never really knew about, but also what are your processes? And if you find that overwhelming, just have a look at PAS 7050. The annex is in the back. It talks about everything that Joel and I have just spoken about, and also what's covered under GPSR. So your recalls, how do you manage your recalls? And that's something that's being pushed in now with the GPSR. They're talking about how you manage your recalls specifically. And that's got very, very specific. So it is a game changer. Well, just to mention a few things come up. Sorry, Joel, go ahead.
No, sorry. And to continue to monitor the future, I feel like, again, we've looked, in my case, the last 20 years in this industry, where there have been so many new regulations, conflict minerals, California Prop 65, I mentioned REACH, Ross, now the e-filing requirements, CPSIA, flammable fabrics. There are continuing the regulations that have been out there for 20 years. There are the requirements coming in the next year or two, but also there will be changes in the next 5 to 10 years, additional ones. And it's not the objective to overwhelm us, even though it can be very overwhelming, but it's more, how do they fit as a component into that overall compliance process? Looking at the regulation and requirements as just another item with what we are doing today to ensure safety, thereby ensuring compliance.
Yeah. And there's a question there, and it's quite a long question, and I will email that person directly. And it's about providing information digitally. And I do understand there is legislation that outright contradicts each other, and that is the reality. And I think what's nice is being able to speak to people about it, and they say, well, do you know what, that is a challenge, this is how industry dealing with it, etc. But in the GPSR, it does talk about using like a QR code or on product information, but that is in addition. We may be getting more information. I hope. I will be incredibly disappointed if we get to December and we don't have any further information from the European Commission. I'm almost 95% sure more information and guidance documents will come out on these specific things. So I think it's watch this space, and I'll try and my best and email you if there's any further that you want to have a discussion about. For some things we just don't know at this stage, but I highly recommend signing up for the webinar with Rutger, which is in September, I believe it's going to be. And then the other questions were about the PSTI and if products are specifically in and out of scope. It's a bit difficult for me to look at that while also presenting here at the same time, but I just recommend look at the guidance documents. I think the information is there and I think it's clear. If it's not, then please do just email Joel or I, and we will help you get to the bottom of that and what's in scope and what's not in scope. But there's some great information out there at the moment.
Yeah. And if we don't know the answer directly, we probably know the person that will have the answer.
We definitely will know the person that answer. So, and somebody's just mentioned there's a tag on the UK government's PSTI page stating that this was published under the, political. We're getting political government. So we have a new government here, yes, which is very, very exciting. Is it going to change? I wish I knew the answer to those questions. I think I'd be a very rich lady if I knew what the government were going to do. I don't know. I think they've probably got other priorities to sort out rather than this. And I would hope that things stay the same and don't change drastically. But I'll be honest with you, I have no idea what the government are going to do. But like anything in life, things can change weekly, monthly. We never know what's going on. But I know that's brought us to the end of the webinar. But have you got any last comments, Joel?
I was just going to say, I'm staying away from politics in the US as well right now.
I'll stay
So I will just say that no matter the politics that we are all watching here, these requirements continue. They
Yes,
do
they
not
will.
seem to be changing.
They're
So
not going to go away.
maybe compliance, e-filings, this is the stability in our current world. So we need to address these. And as Geraldine mentioned, I think we've reached the end.
Yeah, so please do complete the questionnaire that we've just put in there. I recommend getting, you can get some information from ICEE about you attending here today. And that's part of PAS 7050 is investing in your training and documenting that, your own CPD hours. So thank you so much for staying with us. We hope you enjoyed it and that you have a lovely rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you as well. And again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening.